Hello, everybody. Welcome to Weather the Watch. The number one thing I'm looking at is the onset of a pretty frigid weather pattern. Of course, much more frigid up in this area, but pretty cool, but much below normal as far down as Florida. Let's examine what's going to happen. I'm meteorologist Ted Keller. We'll start as I usually do with the visible satellite loop, and this is showing basically a carving out. And if you look at these clouds here, it's really quite fascinating. Look at this little swirl right here in South Dakota. If you've watched this enough, you know that the next thing I'm going to show you is the 500 millibar flow, and that little circle, that little swirl right there is a short wave, but a pretty intense one. And if we take a look now at the 500 millibar flow put on top of that, that's that little X right there. And occasionally you can see these swirls quite evident in the atmosphere. That one is actually kind of compact. This one over Michigan is a little broader. Here's another little short wave here. And all of these are embedded in what's called the long wave trough, which is obviously this thing right here. And this, generally, when you look at the 500 millibar flow, one of the reasons you would do that is just to delineate between warm and cold. So this is basically a carving out of very, very cold air. If you saw this persistently over the central and eastern U.S. over an entire winter, this would lead to some pretty good storms occasionally and some lake effect snows, and we've seen part of that. What we have not seen so far, though, is a nor'easter or a real big snow in the east, nor have we really seen anything south of Iowa in terms of big storms. But winter is young yet, so let's see what happens. And there might be some evidence that that might begin to happen, at least on a small scale, and I'll show you that here in a minute. Here is what the model thinks the maps look like at 3 p.m. today, and it's pretty accurate. Very, very strong winds over the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Minnesota. One front made it from Memphis down to San Antonio. A second reinforcing shot of cold air now entering northern Missouri. If we look at the temperatures at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, it includes some pretty lonely looking numbers there in the Dakotas, single digits common in the Dakotas and in Minnesota. Still above freezing, though, barely in places like Chicago. Still relatively balmy in southern Missouri and over to Kansas, but that is rapidly changing. Wind gusts at that same time, 5 p.m., included the 69 mile per hour gusts in South Dakota, and very commonly 30 to 50 mile per hour gusts through this region here, and there are wind advisories in effect for that very same area. Let's see what the pattern shift is up to. EPS, this is the Euromodel's mean ensemble. So this is for an entire week. Starts this Monday and goes for 7 days afterwards. So it gives you kind of a broad brush idea of where we're headed with that same 500 millibar flow. So on average over that 7 days, what's it going to look like? And this is sort of a depressed flow here. Very rapid flow. And again, when you see the purple colors, that just means that these lines here are either A, lower at that point than they normally are, maybe because they're sagging southward or just because they're just lower. And that's a pretty broad area that's being carved out here. Very interesting to look at. The temperature anomaly is cold, even places like Florida and the Carolinas. Even though that is not as intense as what this looks like, for them, that's a fairly significant change in temperature. So we're looking at readings, about 10 degrees below normal, but that goes all the way into the Gulf, almost to Cuba. So it's a very interesting pattern, and Floridians are not quite used to that, whereas maybe in Minnesota, they are quite used to really frigid temperatures. Does it have an impact on snow? Yeah, it does, and we'll take a look at that now. First of all, snow reports over the last 24 hours. The snow bands just kind of waved their wand and decided to hit north of Buffalo. Buffalo is right there. So if you're about 15 minutes to a half hour north of Buffalo, you got a foot of snow in some areas or close to it. Very common to have it that focused. If we take a look at the radar loop over the afternoon into about 5 o'clock, so these are just these diamonds are snow amounts. And if you look at that darker, that kind of purple color, that gets into the 6 to 12 inch band right in there. And look at Wisconsin, not real heavy snow, but pretty consistently snowing across most of the state over the last 24 hours. There is a winter weather advisory in effect from Iowa north to North Dakota. Winter storm warnings in a few pockets there and way north of Wisconsin and parts of the UP of Michigan, and just kind of a smattering of winter weather advisory out east here. The forecast by the National Weather Service through 7 a.m. Monday does include a lake effect snow band, and sometimes these are really finger patterns, like what hit South Bend, Indiana a couple days ago, and sometimes they're more broad. It just depends on the overall wind flow through this time. So instead of going down the long fetch of the lake, which is what would get Indiana and South Bend, this is more of a flow this way across Lake Michigan. So that's what causes that lake effect snow to kind of pile up, if you will, 12-inch totals there. And again, this part of the UP of Michigan gets buried in snow to the tune of feet and feet and feet, usually most seasons. So it's actually, yes, that's kind of an interesting pattern, but not uncommon to anybody who lives up there. And that's not very many people. Let's take a look at the, and that might be one reason. The EPS snowfall rate here does show that because of this flow, there's kind of an abnormally high area of lake effect snows there. And again, it's normal for them. So for it to show up as a little bit above normal is saying something. And then out in the Cascades and many of the mountain ranges in the west, that's shut down. They would normally see snowfall. So when you see the orange color like that, that means they're not, and they would expect to. So that's kind of the whole setup for next week. If we go a little bit more down the road here, these are snow hazards. The Weather Service looks at this, and these are various dates. Most of them start around the 24th. In fact, they all do, and they'll go a few days ahead. And what I want you to notice is this area right here does actually bring snow into Missouri, Kentucky, maybe the southern Appalachians. Again, it's just a forecast, and it's just a slight risk, so the confidence isn't real high that that's going to happen. But nevertheless, it does represent the possibility of a snow track kind of regaining traction in these areas here, which we, back in November, early December, we kind of had this area activated quite a bit. Not lake effect, just storm systems. And there's some evidence with this forecast that maybe that will sink southward a little bit to more areas in the middle part of the Great Plains or even the middle part of the east. Is there any rain in all of this? Yeah, maybe a little bit. Let's take a look at it. So the 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook, and remember, precipitation in terms of this forecast means liquid precipitation. So if it's snow, they'll melt it down. But a little bit of a high confidence level of above normal precip in that area there. Dry in California. That starts Thursday of next week and goes through Monday. And if we look at this, the 24th through the 30th, we still have this kind of broad area of slight risk of heavier rain from southeast Missouri down to Louisiana, stretching eastward all the way to the Carolinas. Now let's take a look at that temperature forecast. Well, on Saturday the 17th, we have much below normal highs. The high here in Fargo will be 2. Now, has it been colder? Sure, but, this is just a general forecast and a general trend, and certainly the core of the colder air, as indicated, and I've added this here on the left side. I say it a lot, but just so you know, the actual colors are not high temperature bands, which is usually what you would see. It's the departure from normal, which in many ways is maybe a little bit more valuable. And then the actual numbers at the cities are the actual highs for those cities. So, Chicago will only get to 20 degrees. Pretty cool in Dallas, only 48 degrees. And warm in the west and in parts of the east, but this thing is shifting so that by the time we get to Monday, the cold air settled in over Chicago, Wisconsin, the center of the below normal temperatures right there. It finally ends that in most of the east with maybe still a little wraparound around that developing low and cold front in Maine. And the only warm spots are from the Continental Divide westward and in parts of Texas. And then we go to Wednesday, and the warmth kind of returns to the area again. Again, these are all temporary because remember, we're looking at an overall trend of below normal temperatures. So in other words, the implication would be that this area here is going to surge southward again. But in the meantime, the Ohio and mid-Mississippi river valleys and all the way out to the west coast will have an above normal temperature. And for, like, let's say Oklahoma City, 58 is considered above normal. And even for places like Columbus, Ohio, 37 seems chilly to a lot of us, but that's actually at or slightly above the normal. Now, if we take a look at the temperature trends, and this is the 19th through the 23rd, This is just really just kind of a hazardous temperature outlook that kind of broadly shows you from days 3 to 7 where the cold air will be. And not surprisingly, it'll be traversing from the northern plains to the coastal areas of Carolinas and Virginia. And note that Florida is on notice, except for the extreme southeast, for a little bit of chilly weather. So hazardous temperature hazards a little bit on the cold side. You can look at a few more graphs here to kind of verify all this. The 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, high confidence of it being really frigid in the Arrowhead and parts of the UP. But that goes as far south as Kansas and Oklahoma and parts of northern Arkansas. And then if we extend this to the last graph, we'll show you here the 10th through the 16th. Oh, I didn't change the date on that. My apologies. But this is the 8 to 14 day, so ignore that. This is the 8 to 14 day temperature outlook, which basically takes you to the end of the month. And it is chilly again in those same areas. So if there's going to be any snow developing, at least we know the temperatures are cold enough to support that through all these areas here and here, which haven't really quite seen anything yet. This area is used to it so far this winter, but this area is not. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.